On 3rd January, Saturday, this year, 2026, the United States Armed Forces launched, if I am to use President Donald Trump's own words, a large-scale attack on Venezuela and abducted, kidnapped the Venezuelan president elected by the people, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife, and they were taken away to the United States. Now the president of Venezuela is before the American judiciary on charges framed by the United States itself. Now this event is well known all over the world. Almost all media and politicians, political formations are talking about it. What I am trying to do is to make some kind of facts-based analysis on this military action by the United States. First, is this justifiable? Is this military operation justifiable? Are there reasons that can be justified this military operations? Is it in conformity with the international agreements governing relations between countries of the world? Let's see. In the first place, this is a blatant, gross violation of all norms of international relations, all treaties, agreements that govern relations between countries of the world have been grossly, blatantly violated by this action. There are many agreements, treaties, and standards that govern relations between countries. Among them, the United Nations Charter comes first. According to the United Nations Charter, it has outlawed all kinds of arbitrary unilateral military action by any country against another. For example, the Article 2 of the United Nations Charter has prescribed 7 principles that govern relations between countries of the world. Of these 7 principles, 5 have been grossly violated by the US action. The first principle is the sovereign equality of nations. That has been violated. All countries are equal in international transactions and relations. Then one other principle says no country should use force or threat of force against another country. All interstate disputes must be settled peacefully. And in another chapter in the United Nations Charter, it says a country can use military power against another only in case of self-defense. If a country is attacked by another, then the country that is subjected to the attack has the right to use military force. That is also conditional according to the UN Charter. So this military action by the United Nations, by the United States, is a gross violation of all norms of international relations. Second, what are the reasons behind this naked military action? The reasons given by the United States are that President Nicolas Maduro was running a narco-terrorist cartel, a drug cartel, that exports huge amount of narcotic drugs to the United States, as a result of which, according to President Donald Trump, every year 25,000 people die. This is the justification put forward by the United States. Is it true? Are there evidence to prove this allegation? According to my studies, there are no proof. For example, the drug menace is a problem, regional wide problem. It is in fact a worldwide global problem. True, there are drug cartels, drug trafficking, illicit drug trade all over the countries of the Latin America or even in other countries of the world. But according to one of the US officials, whose name is Juan Gonzalez, he is in charge of drug control affairs in the United States. He says the amount of drugs that enter the United States territory is negligible. Larger amount of drugs that enter the United States travel across borders of Mexico, but it was Nicolas Maduro punished by the United States. And then the US says Nicolas Maduro is a brutal dictator, a communist dictator. He is anti-democratic, he suppresses human rights and his political opponents. And he says he kills his political opponents. Or if that is true, but there are no enough evidence, because Maduro was elected by the people of that country, not only once, several times since 2013. Or if there is a semblance of truth in what is said by the United States, then it is not the United States that should handle that problem, that should resolve that problem. It is the people of Venezuela. If Nicolas Maduro is a dictator, and if he is anti-democratic, then it is the right and duty of the Venezuelan people to oust him. That has not happened. Then again, one another accusation is that Nicolas Maduro is supporting other anti-American countries hostile to the United States. But none of these allegations can be proved with evidence, verifiable, documented evidence. Then the question arises, then what are the real reasons for this naked invasion of a sovereign country, violating the sovereignty of that independent country? According to my studies, there are a number of reasons that can be found. One is that the United States, the leading capitalist country, the world's #1 military power, wants to perpetuate its global dominance. It is very clearly expressed in the slogan used by President Donald Trump, both during his first term and also during this current term, second term, that is, make America great again. It means that America was the greatest country or the great country in the world. True, by the middle of 20th century, America, the USA became the #1 economy. It is so even now. Then by the end of the Second World War, the United States as the most powerful military force in terms of military might, #1 country. That is also that exists even today. But its might, both economic and military might, is now challenged. In 1950, the US contribution to the world economic output was 50% of the world's total economic output. Now it has come down to around 21 or 22. So now the new power centers have emerged challenging the United States' global dominance. Among these newly emerged global forces, China is the number one. So the United States now has decided to contain the rise of China, if necessary, to wage war with China. For that, the United States want to control, dominate the entire world. In that exercise, Western Hemisphere is one of the foremost regions that US wants to keep under its thumb. This is not new. This is old. From the days the United States emerged as a world power, both militarily and economically, it wanted to control the entire Western Hemisphere. For example, in 1823, then US President James Monroe, addressing the US Congress, said other countries outside the Western Hemisphere, the countries like the United States, France, Germany, Russia, they cannot interfere in affairs of the Latin American countries. If they do so, it would be treated as a threat to the United States security, and that threat will be dealt with using all means available, including the military option. Then later in 1904, President Theodore Roosevelt confirmed, extended this so-called Monroe Doctrine. After the invasion of Venezuela, President Donald Trump himself used that particular word and extended it to name it as Monroe Doctrine, that is to not indicate the first letters of his first name. So this is one of the reasons. Another reason is that is one of the very, very important reasons for this military action, to grab Venezuela's huge natural resources for the benefit of the United States ruling classes. Venezuela is the country which possesses the world's largest oil deposit. It is even bigger than that of Saudi Arabia. According to certain estimates, Venezuela's oil deposit is something around 304 barrels, huge amount that makes a lot of money. In addition to this large amount of oil, Venezuela owns considerable amount of other minerals like copper, gold, lithium, rare earth elements, so on. The United States, for it to be the world's leading economic and military power, needs this money, and to maintain their high level of living of standard that has been acquired through plunder of other countries' resources, especially Latin America. This is another reason for the United States to launch this. There is yet another reason for this naked military action, that is to keep China out of the Western Hemisphere, especially the Latin American region. Now China is considered by the United States elites, the ruling classes, as its foremost number one enemy or the threat. They are taking numerous action to contain China's rise, if necessary to wage war against China. They are really preparing for it. In their strategic papers, it is very clearly stated. Once the last president, Joe Biden, publicly said China is the foremost threat to the United States. So they want to keep China out. In recent times, especially since the dawn of the 21st century, China's participation in Latin American affairs, both economic, political, cultural, so on, has seen a huge increase. For example, 2-3 decades ago, China had only 20 agreements with Latin American countries, especially with Venezuela. Now China has entered into more than 200 agreements with such countries. So they want to keep China out. It is very clearly stated at the media conference immediately after the attack on Venezuela. Both President Trump and his Secretary of State Marco Rubio clearly said, this is our hemisphere. Others have no right to come there, and we will see that they will be out. So they want to have the monopoly, domination over the Western hemisphere, and to keep out China, not only China, Russia and Iran as well, because they consider it as a growing threat to their hegemony over other countries. There are two other reasons that compel the United States ruling classes to initiate this military action. One is these two other reasons. The first is to scuttle the growing integration between Latin American nations. The integration or cooperation among oppressed countries, exploited countries, is one of the major threats that is confronted by the United States and other world powers. They want to keep Latin American countries weak and poor and controllable. So they want to scuttle every effort that is aimed at regional integration. And the other reason is to oust, topple left-oriented, socialist-oriented countries in the region. Really, in 80s, in 60s, 70s and 80s, there were a number of leftist armed guerrilla movements, armed movements in several Latin American countries that were fighting for justice and to make an equitable society in the Latin American region. Now they are all gone. There are few countries which remain socialist and left oriented, like Cuba, Nicaragua, and from recent times Colombia. They want to topple countries of these nations, state governments of these nations. President Trump and his leading officials and ministers publicly said Cuba's days are numbered. So this is another reason for the invasion of Venezuela and abduction of its legally recognized, popularly elected President Nicolas Maduro together with his wife. So the entire exercise is aimed at consolidating the US world domination in terms of political, economic and military might. This is a threat to the entire humanity. It is a threat to the United States, the ordinary people themselves. So this threat has to be confronted by the people of the world, unless there will be catastrophe. In fact, now this global situation is, in certain aspects, situation is now similar to that prevailed just before the outbreak of the World War I and the World War II. Powerful countries are trying to consolidate their hegemony over the entire humanity. Their domination over the world means poverty, disease, injustice, illiteracy, subjugation to the vast majority of the rest of the people. So this need to be confronted, but it is not an easy task. There has to be a global movement against imperialism. This is imperialism. Imperialism is basically based on amassing, plundering other nations' resources. That has been the practice right throughout since the modern imperialism emerged along with the evolution of the capitalist system. So there needs to be there is an urgent need for the people of individual countries and also of the world who have been exploited, who have been dispossessed of their rights and resources to fight against this global threat. Now there is another camp which is coming up, led by BRICS countries, China, Russia, Iran, South Africa, so on, to a different degrees. So this shows that a multipolar world is in the making. So this has to be supported and fight, and people must be motivated to fight for the triumph of a multipolar world, which will certainly be more democratic, more reasonable, and more egalitarian. Thank you.